Hare Krishna. Is my screen visible?
Yes, sir. Hare Krishna, visible.
Okay.
So only two of us.
Pardon?
Only two of us only.
Oh, it's okay. We'll continue.
Okay, sir.
Om Ajnana-timirandasya Jnananjana-shalakaya Chakshuruniltamena Tasmai Sri Guruve Namah Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeyam Sri Guru Sri Yudapatakamanam Sri Gurun Vaishnavamsya Sri Rupam Sagratam Sagana Raghunathan Vitam Stam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Paljanasaitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Patan Sagana Lalita Sri Vishakan Vitamsya He Krishna Karna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpati Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namaste तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्येव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः श्रीकृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौरभक्तवृंद हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय Hare Krishna, thanks for attending today's session. So today we will continue with our Īśāvāsyam series. We have completed 4 sessions before this until last month. So in Īśāvāsyam there are 18 mantras. So we have completed until mantra number 11. Today we'll be looking at mantras 12, 13 and 14. So just to refresh a bit, the Upanishads are actually part of the Vedas. The main divisions of the Vedas are Samhita, Brahmana, Aranyaka and Upanishads. So the first 3, they belong to the Karma Kanda and Upasana Kanda portions, which involve fruitive activity and also the ritualistic activities. Only the Upanishads talk about the Jnana Kanda. So every Upanishad, it actually belongs to one of the 4 Vedas. So for example, Īśāvāsyam and Brihadaranyaka Upanishad belong to the Shukla Yajurveda division. So all these Upanishads, they have their own invocation mantras. So since Īśāvāsyam and Brihadaranyaka belong to Shukla Yajurveda, they have the same invocation mantra. But in Gita Mahatmya, sloka number 6, this stated, Sarva Upanishado Gavo, Dokta Gopala Nandana, Palto Vatsya Sudhir Bhokta, Duktam Gita Amrita. There are thousands of divisions for the Vedas, out of which only about 6% are available today. But the Bhagavad Gita is very special because Krishna has actually extracted the essence of all the Upanishads and he presented it as Bhagavad Gita. That is what is conveyed through this sloka number 6 of Gita Mahatmya. So all the points conveyed in Bhagavad Gita, they also can be linked to the Upanishads. So as we have seen in all our previous sessions on Īśāvāsyam, even the points conveyed by each mantra, they are also linked to what is available in the Bhagavad Gita. So studying Bhagavad Gita is as good as studying all the Upanishads. So these are the divisions of the mantras and the themes. So you have completed up to mantra number 11. So today we'll be looking at the 8th section and we'll cover mantras 12 to 14. So mantra number 12. Andam tama pravishanti ye sambhutim upasate tato bhuya ivate tamo yau sambhutyam rata. Here, actually for the whole of today's session, this word sambhutim or sambhutyam, this is the most important keyword in today's session. Those who are engaged in the worship of demigods enter into the darkest region of ignorance, and still more so do the worshippers of the impersonal absolute. So there are these two words here, asambhutim and sambhutyam. So asambhutim refers to the demigods, who are actually parts and parcels of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, is sambhutim. So asambhutim refers to those who are dependent on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself, he is not dependent on anyone else. So all the other living entities, including the demigods, they are also dependent on the Supreme. So in the three mantras for today, we'll be looking, we'll be coming across this word, sambhutim, asambhutim. So that is it talks about the distinction between the two words, about how important it is for us to understand who is truly sambhutim, the truly independent one. Even the demigods are dependent on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And as mentioned in the Gita, whatever worship that we do, demigod worship that we do, seeking for material benefits, even those benefits are actually awarded by Krishna only, but it is executed through the demigods. The Sanskrit word asambhuti refers to those who have no independent existence. So asambhuti means those who are dependent. They are dependent on the Supreme. Sambhuti refers to the absolute personality of Godhead, who is absolutely independent. So Sambhuti refers to the one who is completely independent. He does not depend on anyone. That is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. But even the demigods, they are dependent on Krishna. In the Bhagavad Gita 10.2, Sri Krishna states, Name vidu suragana prabhavam na maharshya aham adir hi devanam maharshinam cha sarvasaha. Neither the hosts of demigods nor the great sages know my origin or opulences, for in every respect I am the source of the demigods and sages. So Krishna, being the source of everything that exists, he knows everything about everyone else, but no one, not even the demigods, not even Brahma or Shiva, none of them are completely they are not able to understand Krishna completely. Thus, Krishna is the origin of the powers delegated to demigods, great sages, and mystics. So this is what Krishna also says in the Gita, chapter 7, verses 20 onwards, from 20 to 23. Krishna talks about demigod worship, and he emphasizes that the demigods also get their powers from him only. So that's why even demigods, they are not independent. They themselves are dependent on Krishna. And though we worship demigods for material benefits, those material benefits are only given by Krishna through these demigods. Definition of the absolute by negation is not complete. So there's always this tendency for people to describe the Supreme Personality of Godhead by negating those attributes which we can see and experience ourselves. For example, when we see around us, all the people, we are all individuals and we all have a personal form. So there's always this tendency to imagine that the Supreme Lord must be impersonal. So that's like simply negating whatever that we know. So we tend to come up with some mental concoctions about how the Supreme Lord actually is. This tendency of negating, like since we all have a personal form, so we tend to imagine that the Supreme Lord is impersonal. But that is that is merely mental concoction, which is achieved by negation. So since we see people as having the personal form with a lot of material qualities, so the tendency is always to simply negate. So since we have a personal form, then God must be impersonal. But from the Shastras, it has been described that this tendency is it leads to flawed knowledge. It leads to misconceptions. So the negative qualities are simply the reversals of relative material qualities, and therefore they are also relative. So this is the main problem with such mental concoctions. Since the conception of the impersonal form of the Supreme Lord is derived simply by negating the relative qualities observed in this material world. So such mental concoctions, they are also relative, but the supreme absolute truth is absolute. So that's why it is best for us to simply follow what has been revealed in the Shastras rather than coming up with our own mental concoctions. So when such relative truths are produced as absolute truth, that's why people are not able to realize that the impersonal form of the absolute truth is merely a partial representation. It is only the first level of the three levels. Like we have impersonal Brahman realization, Paramatma realization, and Bhagavan realization. We can only qualify ourselves to go back to Godhead if we have the complete Bhagavan realization. But when we tend to simply negate whatever we see in this material world to come up with our own concoctions of the Supreme Lord, then that's why our understanding is limited. We tend to understand the Supreme Lord as mere impersonal Brahmajyoti when he is actually Bhagavan or the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So for such people, they cannot make further progress to the complete level of Bhagavan realization merely by coming up with these mental concoctions of the impersonal form of the Supreme Lord. So they are restricted to understanding only the first level of impersonal Brahman realization. Apart from that, Krishna himself has demolished this impersonal worship. In Gita 7.24, Krishna says, Avyaktam vyaktim apannam manyate mam abuddhaya parambhavam ajananto mama vyayam anuttamam. Unintelligent man who do not know me perfectly think that I, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, was impersonal before and have now assumed this personality. Due to their small knowledge, they do not know my higher nature, which is imperishable and supreme. So merely by coming up with mental concoctions, people often think that the Supreme Lord must be impersonal. Just because we all have a personal form, then the Supreme Lord must be formless. But that understanding is flawed, and it has been rejected by Krishna himself in Gita 7.24. Apart from that, in Gita 12.2, Krishna gives a very direct reply to the question of Arjuna. When Arjuna asks in 12.1 about the two methods of worship, he asks whether is it better to worship your impersonal form, because even the impersonal Brahmajyoti, even the impersonal Brahman is also a form of the Supreme Lord, but it is only a partial feature. The impersonal form originates from the complete Bhagavan feature, but it is often misunderstood to be the other way around. People think that the complete form is the impersonal Brahmajyoti, and the personal form is merely derived from that impersonal form. So that is the flawed understanding. The Shastras clearly state that the Supreme Personality of Godhead has the complete Bhagavan form, and impersonal Brahmajyoti is merely the effulgence which emanates from his transcendental body. So even in 12.2, Krishna gives a very direct reply to Arjuna, where he says that those who fix their minds on my personal form. So Krishna clearly says here, Mai Avesha Mano Ye Mam. Mai Avesha Mano Ye Mam. He is clearly stating, Mam here means me. He is saying that those who fix their minds on my personal form and are always engaged in worshipping me with great and transcendental faith are considered by me to be most perfect. So Krishna himself is making it clear that it is best to worship the personal form, which is original identity. So apart from the impersonal worshipping method, people tend to think that the Supreme Lord must be impersonal simply because we have personal form. So that has been clearly rejected by Krishna in the Gita itself. And apart from that, people also think that the Supreme Lord has no qualities at all. That is due to this misunderstanding of this term, Nirgunam. But even in the Gita, the true meaning for this word has been explained in 13.15. Sarvendriya Gunavasham, Sarvendriya Viljitam, Asaktam Sarvabrik Chaiva, Nirgunam Gunabhoktracha. Here, the word Nirgunam simply means that the Supreme Lord does not have material qualities. All his qualities are transcendental. Even in some of our previous sessions, we have seen regarding the 64 prominent qualities of Krishna. Krishna has 64 prominent qualities. It's not that he only has those 64 qualities. He has more infinite number of qualities, but out of those, the 64 qualities are the most prominent ones. And like that, the Narayana form or Vishnu Tattva form has 60, and Shiva Tattva has even less, and Jiva Tattva, like Brahma being the topmost Jiva Tattva, he has even less. But even to attain the position of Brahma, that itself is a huge achievement. But the main point here is that this term Nirgunam means that Krishna does not have material qualities. All his qualities are transcendental. Because even when he descends to the material world, he descends in his original transcendental form, his transcendental body. Even in Īśāvāsyam, we have seen some mantras which describe about his body, which is transcendental, and therefore he does not have veins. He does not have any of the material senses like us. He descends with his transcendental body, and therefore his body is never subject to the laws of material nature. He does not age like us. He does not, his body and his senses do not decay over time, unlike us. So such mental speculators, those who come up with their own mental concoctions regarding the formless identity of Krishna, and those who say that he has no he is without senses, meaning Nirgunam. So if they simply come up with such mental concoctions, they can never know that the absolute personality of Godhead is Krishna, and that the impersonal Brahman is the glaring effulgence of his transcendental body, or that the Paramatma, the super soul, is his all-pervading plenary representation. So even in the Gita, in verse 2.2, in chapter 2, verse number 2, the verse starts with Sri Bhagavan Vacha. So in the purport, Prabhupada gives the meaning of the word Bhagavan. In the first half of the purport, Prabhupada explains the meaning of Bhagavan according to the three levels, starting from impersonal Brahman realization, followed by Paramatma realization, and the third one is the complete Bhagavan realization. That is the explanation in the first part of the purport for Gita 2.2. And then in the second half, Prabhupada explains the term Bhagavan according to the criteria defined by Parashara Muni according to the 6 opulences. So the Shastras clearly explain about the hierarchy of these levels. Bhagavan realization is the most complete level. Therefore, Krishna has his personal form. He is not formless. And the Paramatma level, localized Paramatma expansion, and also the impersonal Brahmajyoti level, these are actually derived from the complete Bhagavan feature. So these have been clearly explained in the Shastras. So there's no need for us to distort everything by thinking that the Supreme Lord must be formless simply because we have a personal form. No, Krishna himself has clearly rejected such misconceptions. But to know that, we have to really study the Shastras from authentic and authorized sources. The dependent demigods and great sages imperfectly consider him to be a powerful demigod, and they consider the Brahman effulgence to be the absolute truth. So even the demigods, they themselves tend to misunderstand that Krishna is just another demigod like them. Not just this misunderstanding is not just there with the demigods. Even we ourselves, for those who do not have proper understanding of the Shastras, they tend to think that Krishna is also like any other demigod. But we can never hear about Krishna being linked to any of the material benefits. Like even in Bhagavatam, there is a certain verse which describes about what kind of benefits we can get by worshipping a certain demigod. Like, if I'm not mistaken, in that verse, it is mentioned that those women who are looking for a good husband, they tend to worship Shiva. So like that, in that verse, there's a list of all demigods and the material benefits which we can get by worshipping that particular demigod. All those benefits are mentioned there, but we rarely hear that we can get this particular material benefit by worshipping Krishna. So there's no such thing, and therefore that's exactly the reason why people are not very inclined to worship Krishna, simply because it is not very common to link Krishna with material benefits. We rarely hear that we can get certain material benefits by worshipping Krishna, and that is the special quality of Krishna, because he is not interested in empowering us materially, but his main mission is to elevate us spiritually. He is eager to have all the devotees in the spiritual world, and therefore he would not simply give us all the material benefits that we are looking for. He will only award us with whatever that we need for us to progress spiritually. Unlike the demigods, they as long as we worship the demigods and please them, they will give us whatever material benefit that we are looking for. But Krishna is completely different from them. He will not merely give us the material benefits. He will always help us to progress spiritually. And we ourselves, we must understand in our spiritual journey that material benefits are completely worthless, in the sense that they do not help us to progress spiritually. Whatever material benefits that we get through demigod worship are completely temporary. So it will never help us to liberate ourselves from this endless cycle of Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadhi. That is taken care of by Krishna. As long as we surrender to him, he will help us to cross over this ocean of material existence. Like now we have got this human form of life. So if we surrender to him in this precious form of life, he will help us to progress spiritually. He will give us whatever material necessities that we have, so that it is just enough for us to focus in our spiritual journey. So Krishna is never too interested in helping us to progress materially, because the material progress is completely useless. Just like we saw that so many developing nations had this vision 2020 of becoming developed nation, but we saw clearly even how those so-called developed nations were struggling from 2020 to 2022. Even today, we are all struggling to recover from that damage. So these material benefits are completely useless, and that's why it has been mentioned by Krishna himself that only the less intelligent people will worship demigods, because whatever material benefits that people get by worshipping demigods are temporary, and once they get that benefit, they'll simply switch to some other demigod seeking another type of material benefit. So for such worshippers, they will continue to be entangled in the material bondage. But only the devotees of Krishna, by dint of their surrendering and their unalloyed devotion, know that Krishna is the absolute person and that everything emanates from him. So by surrendering to Krishna, we can understand about Krishna, and we will not treat him like any other demigod. We will worship him the right way. So we will not be worshipping him for material benefits. What we should do is that we must worship Krishna only to empower us materially, so that it is just nice for us to progress spiritually. We do have all these material necessities, but we should not be too greedy and obsessed with those material benefits. We should be more focused on spiritual progress, and that is the main priority for Krishna also. That's why he is different from all the other demigods. So those who think that they can get material benefits by worshipping Krishna, so they are very likely to be disappointed, because that should not be the reason why we should worship Krishna. We should worship him, we should surrender to him, so that we can cross over this material existence, the ocean of material miseries, and we can progress spiritually by worshipping Krishna. So that is the only way we can qualify ourselves to go to the spiritual world. So regarding the impersonal worship, even in chapter 14, the last verse of chapter 14, Krishna says, I am the basis of the impersonal Brahman. So the complete Bhagavan feature is the source for everything, even the impersonal Brahmajyoti. So this has been clearly stated in all the scriptures, and also confirmed by Krishna himself in the Gita, but still people tend to come up with their own mental concoctions. In Gita 7.20 to 23, Krishna says, only unintelligent, bewildered persons driven by strong desire for sense gratification worship the demigods for the temporary relief of temporary problems. So, as mentioned earlier, whatever material benefits which we get by worshipping the demigods, they are all temporary. So, it is considered by Krishna as less intelligent for people to engage in worship for the purpose of gaining material benefits. So such material benefits are not only temporary, but they further entangle us into the material bondage, and we can never liberate ourselves from the problems of Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadhi by being further entangled in the material bondage. We should only make sure that our bare material necessities have been taken care of so that we can focus on our spiritual progress. So for such materially entangled living entities, as long as we do not liberate ourselves from the material bondage, we cannot enter the spiritual world. So we'll be further entangled and we'll be trapped in this cycle of Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadhi, taking various other material bodies, whether it is in the human form of material body or in any other form like the animal forms. We all are suffering from these problems of birth, death, old age, and disease. And even while we are alive, meaning even while we are in a particular body, until the time that we leave that body, we are also vulnerable to the threefold miseries of material nature, namely Adhyatmic, Adi-Daivik, Adi-Bautik. So as long as we are trapped in this material world, whether it is in the upper worlds, middle or lower planets, we will always be experiencing these miseries. That's why it is completely unwise to worship the demigods merely seeking for material benefits. We should surrender to the absolute personality of Godhead, who can completely liberate us from this ocean of material miseries. So in those verses, like starting from 7.20, Krishna says, those whose intelligence has been stolen by material desires surrender unto demigods and follow the particular rules and regulations to worship according to their own natures. As I mentioned earlier, in these three mantras, mantra 12 to 14 of Īśāvāsyam, the important keyword is Sambhutim, because Sambhutim refers to the one who is truly independent, that is Krishna. And even the demigods, they are regarded as Asambhutim. They are dependent. So that's why in these mantras, we'll be seeing this distinction between the demigods and Krishna. So Krishna himself says that only those whose intelligence has been stolen by material desires, they surrender unto demigods. So since such people are looking for more material benefits, they are further entangled in the material bondage, and that's how their intelligence is stolen. Especially for us, like since we have got this precious human form of life, we should be intelligent enough to understand that whatever material benefits that we get in this material world, in this entire material universe, is all temporary. Even if we get the position of Brahma, Brahma himself knows about his vulnerabilities. Even he is not free from the four problems of Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadhi. So that is what he tried to explain to Hiranyakashipu and Ravana. But those idiots, they did not understand that. Brahma himself made it clear that he is not supreme. But those idiots like Hiranyakashipu and Ravana, they wanted to fight against the Supreme Lord, who is much greater than Brahma. They asked for boons from Brahma, who is a devotee of the Supreme Lord, to fight against the Supreme Lord. So Hiranyakashipu and Ravana were such idiots, and today we can see a lot of fan clubs for Ravana made by bigger idiots than Ravana. So in 7.21, Krishna further explains, I'm in everyone's heart as the super soul. As soon as one desires to worship some demigod, I make his faith steady so that he can devote himself to that particular deity. Krishna is always present in our hearts, in the hearts of all living entities as Paramatma. This has also been mentioned by Krishna in many verses, like in even in 18.61. So being present as the Paramatma, he observes everything, and he knows even when we are interested in certain material benefits, and when we tend to worship a particular demigod, then Krishna himself knows that he knows it being the Paramatma in our heart. So he himself, he is the one who makes our faith firm in that demigod. So he never interferes in any of our desires. He simply facilitates. Even when we have certain material we are seeking for certain material benefits, and if we are interested to worship a particular demigod, then he himself facilitates us by making our faith firm in that demigod, because he observes everything as Paramatma in the hearts of all living entities. Endowed with such a faith, he endeavors to worship a particular demigod and obtains his desires. But in actuality, these benefits are bestowed by me alone, the Supreme Lord being the independent one. Sambhutim, he is the one who empowers all the demigods, and demigod worshippers, though they worship the particular demigods to get certain material benefits, they are only being able to get it from that demigod because that demigod has been empowered by Krishna to execute that task. So the benefits are actually given by Krishna only. Men of small intelligence worship the demigods, and their fruits are limited and temporary. Those who worship the demigods go to the planets of the demigods, but my devotees ultimately reach my supreme planet. So as long as we are too attached to a certain demigod and we keep worshipping him, we can elevate ourselves to the planet of that demigod. But what we must understand is that even the demigods are part and parcel of this material universe. Even Brahma himself, who resides in Satyaloka, though it is the topmost planet in the 14 planetary systems, even that planet is part of this material universe. So even by being elevated to the position of Brahma, still we remain to be a living entity. Though Brahma is the most empowered living entity, Jiva Tattva, his position is definitely a very special and elevated position, but still he is also vulnerable like all other living entities in this material universe. So that's why it is less intelligent for those who understand, for those who truly understand about the sufferings due to material bondage. Such people should completely avoid from worshipping the demigods who themselves are also suffering in this material world. In 7.23, it stated that the worshippers of the demigods can go to the planets of the demigods. However, those planets are also still part of this material universe, which is also vulnerable to repeated creation and destruction. So that's why it is very important for us to focus on worshipping the Sambhutin, the independent Supreme Lord, not the Asambhutin demigods who themselves are dependent on the Supreme Lord. With the advanced consciousness, human beings are naturally inclined to travel in outer space and to reach other planets, either by spaceships, mystic powers, or demigod worship. So there are these three ways of how we can travel to other planets. The tendency to travel in outer space is always there in human beings due to our advanced consciousness. So there are three ways to travel: by spaceships, mystic powers, or demigod worship. But the most common way is by worshipping the demigod presiding over a particular planet. So if we keep worshipping Lord Brahma, we can even get elevated to the planet of Satyaloka, but still, it is still part of the material universe. So even that place is vulnerable to repeated creation and destruction. All planets in the material universe are temporary residences. The only permanent planets are the Vaikuntha Lokas found in the spiritual sky. So even if we manage to occupy the position of Brahma in Satyaloka, still that is an elevated position, but even Brahma has to die. In Gita 9.25, Krishna says, Yanti Devrata Devan Pitru Yanti Pitruvrata Bhutani Yanti Bhutecha Yanti Madhyajno Pimam. So this is quite similar to what we saw in 7.23, where it is stated that by worshipping a certain demigod, we can go to that planet of the demigod. So those who worship the demigods will take birth among the demigods, but those who worship me will live with me. So if we are clear about our goal, about going to the spiritual world, then we will be focused on worshipping Krishna. Otherwise, for those who are obsessed with material benefits, those who are obsessed with demigod worship, they can do so. Even Krishna will help to facilitate them, as he has mentioned in 7.21, 22. So they are free to do so, but they have to understand that such activities will only further entangle them in the material bondage, simply because all the planets of the demigods are still part of the material universe, and all these 14 planetary systems, they are all vulnerable to repeated creation and destruction, where repeated birth, death take place. But those who attain my abode, meaning the abode of Krishna in the spiritual world, never take birth again. So only by going to the spiritual world, we can liberate ourselves from the problems of Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadhi. Demigod worship will only entangle us and make us reside in different planets, which are also part of the material universe. Īśāvāsyam points out that one who worships the demigods and attains to their material planets still remains in the darkest region of the universe. The darkness is dense, and therefore the sun and moon are required for illumination. Even if we look at the front cover of Bhagavatam, for Bhagavatam Canto 1, in the front cover, this illustration is provided. We can see Goloka Vrindavan surrounded by so many Vaikuntha planets, and there's also this dark spot, which is the Mahatattva. Mahavishnu resides the Mahatattva, and all the material universes emanate from his body. So this Mahatattva is regarded as the dark spot, which is devoid of the Brahmajyoti illumination. All the other Vaikuntha planets, the entire spiritual world, they are illuminated by the Brahmajyoti effulgence, which originates from the body of Krishna. So even Goloka Vrindavan and also all the other Vaikuntha planets are illuminated by the Brahmajyoti effulgence. But the Mahatattva, which represents the entire collection of all the material universes which emanate from the body of Mahavishnu, that is the dark spot, and therefore the sun and moon are required in the material universes. However, the spiritual world, which consists of all the Vaikuntha planets and the HQ, the headquarters of the spiritual world being Goloka Vrindavana, they are all self-illuminated by the Brahmajyoti effulgence. So even that has been mentioned by Krishna in 15.6. Krishna says, Natat Bhashayate Suryo, Na Shashanko na Pavaka, Yadgatva na Nivatante Taddama Paramam Mama. Krishna talks about the special feature of the spiritual world, where the supreme abode is not illumined by the sun or moon, nor by fire or electricity. Those who reach it never return to this material world. So that is another distinction between the spiritual world and the material world. In the material world, we need the sun and moon, but the There's no need for that in the spiritual world because they are all self-effulgent. But even within the material world, as we have seen regarding the 14 planetary systems, the lower planetary systems, which are the subterranean regions beneath the earth. So those are the places where even sunlight cannot enter. So these are all the drawbacks in the material universe. The problems of life cannot be solved simply by going to the moon planet or to some other planet above or below it, because all these planets are still within the material universe. As long as we are stuck in this material universe, no matter which planet we go to in the 14 planetary systems, we will always remain suffering due to the four problems. Therefore, Īśāvāsyam advises us not to bother with any destination within this dark material universe, but to try to get out of it and reach the effulgent kingdom of God. Many pseudo-worshippers who become religionists only for the sake of name and fame do not wish to get out of this universe and reach the spiritual sky. So such pseudo-religionists who have flawed understanding, they themselves do not try to liberate themselves from this material universe. And since they are masquerading as spiritual masters, they also tend to mislead others. So that is another danger. Even these self-proclaimed spiritual masters who do not belong to any bona fide parampara, they themselves do not understand about why it's important to liberate ourselves from the material bondage. Even they engage in activities which lead to further entanglement. And since they are masquerading as spiritual masters, they also end up misleading others. So that's how they preach the cult of atheism. Atheism here is not limited to denying the existence of God. What is even more dangerous is the impersonalist philosophy, because it is actually like worse than atheism. The impersonalist philosophy is like atheism in the under the garb of theism, because even those who people who have some belief, those who are believers to a certain extent, even they tend to be misled by this impersonalist school of thought. So this is the problem with all these pseudo-religionists. They themselves get further degraded, and they also end up influencing others, so that even those people go to hell. The ignorant pseudo-religionists violate the Vedic injunctions simply because they don't even know the Vedic injunctions, because they don't belong to any bona fide parampara. So these people, they tend to proudly proclaim that they have learned everything on their own. They say that everything is inside, everything is inside within you. You just have to search. So they give all such misleading. They always mislead others. Even they themselves are misled by their own mental concoctions, and they also mislead the other unfortunate souls who end up as their followers. So it is the typical case of the blind leading the blind. So that's why there are so many misunderstandings and misconceptions, especially within our Hindu community. People don't even know about the Shastras. Many people who claim that they are Hindus, they don't even know how many chapters and verses are there in the Bhagavad Gita. They cannot answer without Googling. So we have to completely avoid from being falling prey to all these misleading traps. And Krishna himself has said that as long as we surrender to him and engage in his devotional service, he will help us to cross over this ocean of material miseries. So it is clearly stated by Krishna in Gita 7.14. The path of salvation from the material clutches fully depends on the principles of knowledge and detachment gained from serving the Lord. So we need to have knowledge and also detachment. We can get knowledge only from the authentic and authorized scriptures. So that's why it is very, very important that we study the scriptures and completely avoid trying to learn about our Dharma by watching cinema, serial, or from the WhatsApp University. We have to focus on the authentic scriptures. So the pseudo-religionists who masquerade as spiritual masters, they neither have knowledge nor detachment. Since they don't have knowledge, they engage in activities which further entangle us in the material bondage. They don't follow the regulative principles. They don't engage in proper spiritual practice, but they tend to masquerade as spiritual masters. So they only end up misleading others, the unfortunate souls who end up as their followers. Such violators of religious principles have no respect for the authoritative acharyas, simply because they themselves, these pseudo-religionists, they themselves do not belong to any bona fide parampara. These rogues are the most dangerous elements in human society because apart from misleading others, they also lead to many other problems, even to problems like terrorism. It is all due to such pseudo-religionists who distort everything. So the importance of having a spiritual master has been mentioned by Krishna himself in 4.34. Tad vidhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadekshanti te jnanam jnanyas tattva darshinaha. Krishna himself is saying that we have to serve the spiritual master and engage in submissive inquiry. Here, submissive inquiry means that we can inquire from the spiritual master, but it should be done in a submissive mood. We should not simply tend to challenge the spiritual master all the time, because the logic is very simple. If a student goes to school or to the university and then he keeps challenging the lecturers, then the entire duration of all the classes will be full of debates only, so they can never complete the syllabus. So that's why it is okay to inquire, but there's no point in being engaged in endless debates. So it is perfectly okay to inquire, but we should not blindly challenge the spiritual masters, but there's always room for discussion. And while it is important for us to respect our spiritual masters, it is also important for the spiritual masters themselves to behave in a certain way. In 3.21, Krishna says, Yaj yaj acharati shreshthas tattateve taro jana sayat pramanam kurute lokas tattanuvartate. Whatever action a great man performs, common men follow, and whatever standards he sets by exemplary acts, all the world pursues. So an acharya is completely different from any other teacher, because the acharya is the one who he makes it clear for the disciples through practical example. He himself lives according to the rules that have been explained in the Shastras. Like Srila Prabhupada gave us the 4 regulative principles. But he himself, he followed those regulative principles. And even when it comes to chanting, Prabhupada gave the rule of minimum 16 rounds. But in the Gaudiya Maths, where Prabhupada himself got his training under his spiritual master, Srila Bhakti-Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So even in those Gaudiya Maths, the standard is 64 rounds minimum. But in those Gaudiya Maths, the spiritual master, Srila Bhakti-Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he himself had his own personal benchmark, which was way much higher than the benchmark he set for the disciples. The disciples were required to chant 64 rounds per day, but Srila Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Thakur was chanting close to 192 rounds, if I'm not mistaken. This is what I heard from the YouTube lectures of other preachers like Amarendra Das. So the Acharya himself had a much higher personal benchmark. The Acharya tells disciples to chant a certain number of rounds, but he himself chanted way much higher, 3 times more than what he told the disciples to do. So the Acharya is the one who leads by example. So teachers or lecturers who give all sorts of advice to students, but if they themselves go to smoke in the toilet, despite knowing that the campus is a no smoking zone, so such people cannot be called acharyas. Acharya is a teacher who leads by example. So it is important for disciples to respect the Acharya, and the Acharya himself also has to lead by example according to his personal benchmarks. So now mantra number 13. Anyad evo sambhavat, anyad ahur asambhavat, iti shushruma dhiranam, yena tad vichachakshire. It is said that one result is obtained by worshipping the supreme cause of all causes, and that another result is obtained by worshipping what is not supreme. All this is heard from the undisturbed authorities, Dhiranam, who clearly explain it. So this distinction between the Sambhutim and Asambhutim, the distinction between the independent Supreme Lord and all the other dependent living entities, including the demigods, these have all been heard from Dhiranam, the bona fide paramparas consisting of the spiritual masters. They are regarded as the dhiras, the undisturbed authorities, because they are always focused on their spiritual progress. The system of hearing from undisturbed authorities, those who are undisturbed by the material bondages, they are our acharyas in our bona fide parampara. So it is important for us to hear from the bona fide acharyas. We should learn from the acharyas who they themselves practice what they preach. So unless we get the knowledge from the acharyas, we cannot have the key, the real key to transcendental knowledge. The bona fide spiritual master, who has also heard from his undisturbed acharya, never presents anything that is not mentioned in the Vedic literature. So what is the criteria to identify a bona fide spiritual master? Simple, that spiritual master himself should belong to a bona fide parampara. He himself should have received his knowledge from another acharya who belongs to a bona fide parampara, because all the bona fide paramparas originate from Krishna. So that's how we can get the real transcendental knowledge, and not from cinema, serial, or WhatsApp university. So only if we have the true transcendental knowledge, we can understand that one achieves different results by different modes of worship. If we worship the Supreme Lord, we will certainly reach him in his eternal abode. So this we know from the authentic scriptures like Bhagavad Gita. It has been stated in 7.23 and also in 9.25. If we wish to remain on this wretched planet with our planning commissions and our stopgap political adjustments, we can certainly do that also, because Krishna never interferes in the freedom of living entities. Krishna only facilitates according to our material desires. For those who do not wish to practice Krishna consciousness, and if they simply want to enjoy, they are free to do so. Krishna will continue to facilitate them with the 84 lakh apartments. Today, Krishna has given us this prestigious apartment called the human form of life. So if we do not understand or appreciate the importance of this apartment, Krishna will give us some other apartment, like for those who proudly proclaim that they are proud non-vegetarians or pure non-vegetarians. So for them, Krishna will give them some other apartment through which they can enjoy raw meat. Nowhere in authentic scriptures it is said that one will ultimately reach the same goal by doing anything or worshipping anyone. Such foolish theories are by self-made spiritual masters who have no connection with the parampara. So again, the pseudo-religionists or self-made spiritual masters, they always mislead everyone by saying that they say things like you can reach the Supreme any way you want. But it is simple logic. We know that a person who has purchased a ticket for Calcutta can reach Calcutta, but not Bombay. So this is exactly what Krishna himself says in Gita 9.25. Yanti Devrata Devan. Those who worship the demigods will go to the planet of demigods. Those who worship me will reach my supreme abode. This is what Krishna himself says in 9.25. But the self-proclaimed spiritual masters, they mislead everyone with all their flawed teachings. Unless one has received knowledge from the bona fide spiritual master who is in the recognized line of disciplic succession, one cannot have the real thing as it is. So as long as we do not follow the knowledge received through the bona fide parampara, we can never get the true benefit of going back to Godhead. So that's why Krishna has also emphasized regarding the importance of the disciplic succession. In 4.2, Krishna says, Evam parampara praptam imam rajarishyo vidu sakalneya mata yoganashta param tapa. So the knowledge of Bhagavad Gita was actually conveyed by Krishna to the sun god, Vivaswan, as mentioned in 4.1. So from there, Krishna is explaining how the knowledge travels in the disciplic succession. However, in due course of time, there's always the risk of the knowledge getting distorted. But that doesn't mean that we can keep coming up with our own mental concoctions. Even in the same chapter 4, in 4.34, Krishna talks about the importance of approaching the spiritual master. So it is important for us to receive knowledge from the spiritual master, and that spiritual master should also be someone who receives that knowledge from a bona fide parampara. The Bhakti Yoga principles defined in the Bhagavad Gita had become distorted. This happened many years after Krishna first instructed Vivaswan. Therefore, the Lord had to re-establish the disciplic system, beginning with Arjuna. So through the various incarnations of the Lord, he keeps coming back to attract the pious souls. And to do that, the Lord himself provides us with everything that is necessary. In Dwapara Yuga, the Lord gave us Bhagavad Gita. But even until now, in our beautiful Sanatani community, many people who claim to be Hindus, they still cannot answer how many chapters and verses are there in the Bhagavad Gita without Googling. So that's why Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also came and he gave the simple process of chanting the 16-word mantra. But even that is a huge challenge for us. So that is the effect that Maya has on us. But our acharyas have further simplified the process. Srila Prabhupada has worked so hard to give us the Bhagavad Gita as it is. And he has also re-emphasized the importance of the process of chanting. But we hardly pay any heed to any of these important things because we are so busy with all other types of nonsense. Then we keep blaming God for everything that happens. We fail to get the proper knowledge from the Shastras. We do not follow the instructions of our acharyas. Then we keep crying, saying that why all these bad things happen to me. We don't even know that as long as we are trapped in this Dukkalayam, we are only going to experience miseries. So that's why Krishna has given us all the solutions to it in the Bhagavad Gita. But we don't even touch it. then we keep trying for everything that happens. But the Supreme Lord chose Arjuna because Arjuna was his devotee and friend, and only such a devotee could understand. So by starting the chanting process and by developing devotion towards Krishna, then we will be able to understand the Bhagavad Gita even more easily. And also through the association of devotees, through the various movements of ISKCON all over the world, even today, it is much easier because we can attend so many online courses on Bhagavad Gita for free. Only the Lord's devotee and friend can understand the Gita. So this has been mentioned in 4.3. Krishna explains why he chose Arjuna, because only the devotee can understand. For non-devotees who are very happy with what they are doing, they are free to do so. Krishna will always facilitate them also. Also in 11.54, Krishna talks about how one can understand him only through undivided devotional service. My dear Arjuna, only by undivided devotional service can I be understood as I am, standing before you, and can thus be seen directly. Only in this way can you enter into the mysteries of understanding. So Krishna himself emphasizes the importance of devotion, bhakti yoga. That is what our acharyas have also been emphasizing. 18.55, Bhaktya Mama Vijanati. One can understand me as I am only by devotional service. So these are the privileges available to devotees only. That is why in 18.67, Krishna says, Idaḿ tena tapaskaya na bhaktaya kadachana nacha sushrave vakyam nachamamyo abhyusati. This confidential knowledge may never be explained to those who are not austere or devoted or engaged in devotional service, nor to one who is envious of me. So Krishna himself says that it is best not to convey the Bhagavad Gita to non-devotees, simply because no matter whatever we say, they are not going to be convinced. So why should we waste our time with them? Let them be happy with what they are doing. On the contrary, it is best for us as devotees. We can always preach to other devotees, or at least even to the demigod worshippers who have some belief. Even the demigods, they themselves will try to empower their devotees in such a way that even they get enlightened about Krishna. So Krishna is clearly saying that it is best to convey the knowledge of Bhagavad Gita to the devotees, simply because the non-devotees who are completely bewildered by Maya, they can never be convinced about what Krishna is saying, because Krishna himself also says in Gita 7.14 that the effect of Maya is so strong. But even to overcome that, surrender towards Krishna is most important. But for those who refuse to study the Gita, if they are so busy with doing other things, just like other living entities, like animals, so they are free to do so. Krishna will also facilitate them. There's no servant in this world more dear to me than he, nor will there ever be one more dear. So we can always preach to the devotees and exchange our knowledge. Krishna clearly says that only those who have lost their sense of worship, the demigods for paltry rewards. So as mentioned earlier, material benefits are always temporary. So those who engage in demigod worship, they are less intelligent because they are worshipping for temporary benefits. They are not looking for the permanent solution. What is the permanent solution? We have to get out of this material universe. We have to completely liberate ourselves from this material bondage. How to do that? Krishna has given all the required information in Bhagavad Gita, of which the essence can be summarized in 18.66, where Krishna says, Sarva dharman parityajya mamekam sharanam raja. Aham tvam sarva papebhyo mokshishyami ma suchaha. For those who surrender to Krishna, they need not worry. This has been mentioned by Krishna himself in 18.66. Only those who are cleansed of all sinful reactions can have such unflinching faith in the Supreme Lord. So Krishna tells the devotees to surrender to him, and he will purify us from all our sins. And by doing that, we get the chance to progress further in devotional service. Again, the word Sambhavat, as mentioned earlier, by worship of the supreme cause is very significant. So in the three mantras, 12, 13, and 14, this is the most important keyword, Sambhavat. It is important to understand that the Supreme Lord is Sambhavat, the one who is truly independent, unlike the demigods. So the Supreme Lord is the origin of everything that exists, as mentioned by Krishna himself in 10.8. Īdaḿ Sarvasyam Prabho Matta Sarvaṁ Pravartati Iti Matva Vadante Mam Buddhava Samanita. Krishna is the source of all spiritual and material worlds. So the demigods who are also bound by this material world, this dark spot, part of the Mahatattva, even they are subservient to the Supreme Lord. Krishna is the creator of everyone, including Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. The Vishnu Tattva expansions, even beginning from Mahavishnu, Garudasha Vishnu, even these expansions originate from Krishna only. In Atharva Veda, Gopal Tapani Upanishad, it is similarly said, he who existed before the creation of Brahma and who enlightened Brahma with Vedic knowledge is Lord Sri Krishna. The Narayana Upanishad 1, Narayana desired to create all living beings. Thus, from Narayana, Brahma was born. Narayana created all the Prajapatis. Narayana created Indra, the 8 Vasus, 11 Rudras, 12 Adityas. Narayana Upanishad also states that Devaki's son, Krishna, is the Supreme Lord. So, another very interesting information from here. We have always heard about these 33 Koti Devatas. In Sanskrit, apart from the meaning of crore, Koti, it could mean crow, but another meaning for it is supreme. So in reality, there are only 33 supreme devatas. Among the demigods, among the various demigods, there are only these 33 supreme devatas. So 33 Koti devatas is actually referring to the 33 supreme devatas, 8 Vasus, 11 Rudras, 12 Adityas, plus Indra and Prajapati. We get the 33 supreme devatas. This has been explained in also in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. So this is a topic which often becomes quite controversial because many people, even there's one Bhagoda who ran away from Bharat. He was fearing punishment in Bharat, so he ran away to Malaysia. And even that Bhagoda, in his preaching sessions, he often makes fun of this concept of 33 Koti Devatas. So for such people who are in actuality, they are completely ignorant. So they end up making fun of the things mentioned in our Shastras, but from the authentic Shastras, we get to know the reality only by following the authentic Shastras. The risk that exists even among our community is that many people tend to follow the lectures of that idiot. But if we follow the authentic Shastras, we can get to know the real thing. So this is what is meant by the concept of 33 Koti Devatas, the supreme Devatas. In Atharva Veda, Mahavishnu 1 also states only Narayana existed in the beginning. So that's why Krishna himself is the supreme and he is completely independent. Moksha Dharma, I created the Prajapatis and Rudras. They don't have complete knowledge of me because they are covered by my illusory energy. So even the demigods who are part and parcel of this material universe, they are also vulnerable to being bewildered by Maya. In Varaha Purana, Narayana is the supreme personality of Godhead, and from him the four-headed Brahma was manifested, as well as Rudra, who later became omniscient. Thus, all Vedic literature confirms that Narayana or Krishna is the cause of all causes. So again, regarding the distinction between the words Asambhutim and Sambhutim, Narayana or Krishna is Sambhutim, the truly independent one. All the others, even the demigods, they are all Asambhutim. They are all dependent on Krishna only. Also in Brahma Samhita 5.1, Ishvara Parama Krishna, the Supreme Godhead, Satchidananda Vigraha Anadi Radhi Govinda Sarva Karana Karanam, the cause of all causes. Apart from that, given in Bhagavatam 4:31-14, this is the last chapter of the 4th canto. In this chapter, Narada Muni, he is explaining to the Prachetas about how worshipping Krishna satisfies all the demigods. Yata tarur mula isheshanena tripyanti tatskanda bhujopashaka pranopahara chayatendriyanam tataiva sarvanam achyutedya. As pouring water on the root of a tree energizes the trunk, branches, twigs, and everything else, and as supplying food to the stomach enlivens the senses and limbs of the body. Simply worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead through devotional service automatically satisfies the demigods who are parts of that Supreme Personality. Worshipping Krishna simply means that we are pouring water to the root, and the branches and leaves will get nourished. So worshipping Krishna does not mean that we are disrespecting the demigods. Simply by worshipping Krishna, we can also satisfy the demigods. This is what has been mentioned by Narada Muni himself. The conviction that Krishna is all in all is established when one hears the transcendental message from the undisturbed Acharya with faith and love. So as we have seen, we can clearly see the distinction between Krishna and all the other demigods as mentioned in all the Shastras, and these Shastras have been made available to us through the mercy of our Acharya, Srila Prabhupada. So only by following these teachings, we can get the true transcendental message. Those who are faithless are described in the Bhagavad Gita as Mudas. The Mudas derive the personality of Godhead because they do not have complete knowledge from the undisturbed Acharya. Just like that stupid Bhagoda who ran away from Bharat, fearing punishment there. So idiots like him, they will always make fun without knowing what is there in the authentic scriptures. Before hearing the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna was disturbed by the material whirlpool, but he became Buddha, the enlightened one. After hearing the Bhagavad Gita, he worshipped the Lord by fighting with his so-called relatives, and in this way he became a pure devotee of the Lord. Arjuna was disturbed in the beginning, but after hearing the Gita, he was convinced and he performed his duty according to the instruction of the Supreme Lord. So we can see that in the beginning, Arjuna was saying that, my dear Krishna, seeing my friends and relatives present before me in such a fighting spirit, I feel the limbs of my body quivering and my mouth drying up. My whole body is trembling, my hair is standing on end, my bow Gandiva is slipping from my hand, and my skin is burning. This was the condition of Arjuna before hearing the Gita. Also in 2.7, Arjuna surrenders as a disciple. So this is the sign of a devotee. He surrendered towards Krishna, and only then Krishna starts to instruct him. After hearing Krishna's instruction, in 18.73, Arjuna says, Nashtomo smritir labdha tatvasadan mayuchata stidosmi gata sandeha karishye vachanam tava. My dear Krishna, O infallible one, my illusion is now gone. I've regained my memory by your mercy. I'm now firm and free from doubt, and I'm prepared to act according to your instructions. So throughout the 18 chapters, there were so many questions raised by Arjuna, to which Krishna clearly answered everything. And Arjuna himself is saying that he is completely satisfied and that his doubts are all gone. So this is completely contrary to what is being propagated by many other idiots who have never studied the Gita. A lot of such idiots say that Krishna forced Arjuna to fight, but those idiots don't know that Arjuna himself admitted towards the end of the Gita that he was fully convinced about whatever Krishna has said in the chapters of the Gita. Sambhuta is the source of birth and sustenance, as well as the reservoir that remains after annihilation. Janmadi Asyayata. The source of all emanations is not like a dead stone, but is abhijna, or fully conscious. So this is mentioned in the first verse of the Bhagavatam. In 1.1.1, the Supreme Absolute Truth is his qualities are explained in the first verse of the Bhagavatam. Lord Krishna also says in Gita 7.26 that he is fully conscious of the past, present, and future, and no one, including the demigods, knows him fully. When even the empowered demigods do not understand Krishna fully, certainly half-educated spiritual leaders who are disturbed by the tides of material existence cannot know him fully. Only those acharyas belonging to the bona fide parampara have the true knowledge, not the self-proclaimed spiritual leaders. The attempt by these so-called spiritual leaders is something like pouring water on the leaves of a tree instead of the root. So if we follow those self-proclaimed spiritual masters who do not belong to any bona fide parampara, so they will only lead us to water the leaves, not the root. Īśāvāsyam advises us to pour water on the root. So worship of the mass of humanity by rendering bodily service can never be perfect. It is less important than service to the soul. So all these so-called philanthropic activities, they only address the material needs, which are temporary and keep changing. They never address the root cause. These people who always say that serving the poor is the solution to everything, they don't understand that they are only helping to serve the material needs. They are not working on the permanent solutions. The living being is perpetually suffering in different types of bodies from the material miseries of birth, old age, disease, and death. Real service to humanity is rendered when one teaches surrender to and worship of the Supreme Lord with full love and energy. So we can only help others if we help them to understand that we are all suffering in this material world and how we can liberate ourselves from this ocean of material miseries. So that would be real service. The simple way to worship the Supreme Lord in this age of disturbance is to hear and chant about his great activities. The mental speculators, however, think that the activities of the Lord are imaginary. Therefore, they refrain from hearing of them and invent some word jugglery without any substance to divert the attention of the innocent masses of people. Again, if we tend to follow those self-proclaimed acharyas, we will only end up being fools, more foolish than those fools. The importance of chanting, it has been mentioned in Bhagavatam 11.5.32. Krishna himself says that in the age of Kali, intelligent persons perform congregational chanting. So it is the easiest and the most effective way to liberate ourselves from this ocean of material miseries for us, Kali Jivas. This process is especially meant for us, the unfortunate Kali Jivas. So even after being given such a simple process, we refuse to do it due to the influence of Maya. Also, in 12.3, 51 and 52, it has been stated, Kale dosa nidirajan asi eko mahan guna kirtana eva krishnasya mukta sangam param rajit. Simply by chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, one can become free from material bondage and be promoted to the transcendental kingdom. This is the good quality of Kali Yuga, which is otherwise an ocean of faults. The process for us is so simple. Tritayat Jayato Vishnum Tretayam Yato Make Dwapare Paricharayam Kalautat Hari Kirtanat. The processes of worship in all the previous yugas were so complicated, and it is impossible for us to even think about performing such methods. But the simple method of chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra is available to us, and it is more than enough to liberate ourselves from this material bondage, especially for us, the Kali Jivas. The Upanishads indirectly draw our attention to the primal Lord Sri Krishna, but the Bhagavad Gita which is the summary of all the Upanishads, directly points to Sri Krishna. Therefore, one should hear about Krishna as he is by hearing from the Bhagavad Gita or Srimad Bhagavatam. And in this way, one's mind will gradually be cleansed of all contaminated things. For those who have tried to distribute books, especially the Gita, you all must have heard people saying that, no, I don't want to study the Gita, I want to study the Vedas. So for such unfortunate souls, they don't even understand that Gita is the essence of all the Upanishads. For being Kali Jivas, we have so limited time. So it is best for us to focus on the Gita. We should first study the Gita and capture the essence of all the Upanishads. And only then we can think about exploring other scriptures. It is best to fully master the Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam before even thinking about other scriptures. But unfortunately, in our community, those people who don't even know how many chapters and verses are there in the Gita, they start talking about the Vedas. The Lord's inner direction cleanses the devotee's heart of all contamination. This is precisely the reason why it is important to be a devotee, to engage in Bhakti Yoga. Non-devotees are under the sway of passion and ignorance. So as long as they choose to remain non-devotees, they will always be subject to the modes of passion and ignorance, which lead to further degradation. We have obtained this human form of life after going through so many lower forms. If we do not utilize this precious opportunity now, we are likely to get degraded further to lower levels. So that's why it is so important for us to not miss this opportunity. We should engage in Bhakti Yoga and fully follow the instructions of our acharyas so that we can elevate ourselves to the modes of goodness and pure goodness to be qualified to enter the spiritual world. For a devotee, the modes of passion and ignorance are removed by the grace of the Lord. In this way, the devotee becomes situated in the quality of goodness, the sign of a perfect Brahmana. Anyone can qualify as a Brahmana if he follows the path of devotional service under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master. In Kali Yuga, there are so many people who claim to be Brahmanas simply because they are born in a Brahmana family. So that itself shows that they are not fit to be Brahmanas. A Brahmana is the one who has developed the mode of goodness, and being a Brahmana is not truly a sign of complete elevation, because even the mode of goodness is still a material mode. It is important to further elevate ourselves to the mode of pure goodness, and that is what would enable us to become Vaishnavas. So the Vaishnava, being the fifth Varna, is above everything else. So that's why anyone can qualify as a Brahmana if he follows the path of devotional service. By engaging in Bhakti Yoga, we can become Vaishnavas, and anyone who is a Vaishnava, he is definitely a Brahmana. He is even above the Brahmana. Also in this verse from Bhagavatam, it is stated that anyone can be purified by taking shelter of the devotees of the Lord. Apart from that, even in 9.32, Gita 9.32, Krishna says, Mami Palta Vyapasritya, Ye Pishor Papa Yonaya, Striyo Vaishyas Tata Sudras, Tepiyanti Param Gatim. Anyone who takes shelter under Krishna, they can all be purified, regardless of their material designations. Whether one is the Shudra, Vaishya, or even a Brahmana, these are all material designations. Even for women, the gender is merely a material quality. But regardless of our material qualities, through surrender to Krishna, we can attain the supreme destination, as mentioned by Krishna himself in 9.32. When one attains Brahmanical qualifications, he becomes happy to render devotional service to the Lord. Automatically, the signs of God is unveiled before him. The more we engage in devotional service, the more Krishna helps us to become enlightened, and we get the ability to understand the knowledge revealed in the Shastras. By knowing the signs of God, one gradually becomes freed from material attachments and one's doubtful mind becomes crystal clear by the grace of the Lord. So this is why it is important to first serve the Supreme Lord simply by starting to chant. We have often heard that many people who even try to study the Gita, they also complain that they are not able to understand anything. So that is why it is important to keep chanting, and as we keep increasing our service, we will get the ability to understand the Gita better. Now the last mantra for today, mantra number 14. Sambhutim cha vinasam cha yastad vedo vayam saha vinashena mrityum chitva sambhutyamritam ashnuti. So again, we can see that the word Sambhutim is being repeated, just like in the previous mantras. One should know perfectly the personality of God is Sri Krishna and his transcendental name, form, qualities, and pastimes, as well as the temporary material creation with its temporary demigods, men and animals. When one knows these, he surpasses death and the ephemeral cosmic manifestation with it, and in the eternal kingdom of God, he enjoys his eternal life of bliss and knowledge. So again, the importance of understanding the Sambhutim, the Supreme Lord, is being emphasized here. By the so-called advancement of knowledge, human civilization has created many material things. Yet it has failed to create a situation in which people need not die, take birth again, become old, or suffer from disease. Many of the so-called intelligent people, those who claim to be scientists, they claim to be working on so many things, but those are all material. They don't have the answers about how we can liberate ourselves from the problems of Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadhi. And it is useless to ask them, because even those so-called scientists, even they themselves are not immune to the problems of Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadhi. Whenever an intelligent man raises the question of these miseries before a so-called scientist, the scientist very clearly replies, the scientist very cleverly replies that material science is progressing and that ultimately it will be possible to render man deathless, ageless, and diseaseless. This is utter rubbish, because material science can never provide solutions to problems of the spirit soul. We being spirit souls, we are being vulnerable to the problems of Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadhi due to this material entanglement. We are materially encaged in this material body. So it is a problem for our spirit soul, and we can only find it from the spiritual science, which is revealed through our Shastras. So these scientists who are saying that they can work towards achieving eternal life and all that is utter rubbish. So there's no point in asking them. We just have to study the scriptures, the Shastras, through which Krishna himself has revealed the true transcendental message. Simply by following the scriptural injunctions and also by following the instructions of our acharyas, we can liberate ourselves from these miseries. The duration of life varies according to species. Even Brahma is vulnerable to experiencing death, and therefore this entire material universe is called Martya Loka. We have heard of the three lokas, Urdhva Loka, Madhya Loka, and Adho Loka, the upper, middle, and lower planetary systems. However, this entire material universe is known as Martya Loka, the place of death, because even Brahma has to experience death. The Supreme Lord's energies can be categorized as para and apara, superior and inferior. We, the living entities, we belong to the superior category of the Lord's energy. However, due to our current state of being conditioned by the material modes of nature, we actually belong to a special category called the Tatastha Shakti or marginal energy. However, our true identity is that we belong to the superior spiritual energy of the Supreme Lord, but we are now in a degraded position from our original identity, and we are being under the influence of the material energy, which is actually the inferior energy. So such is our degraded condition now. Our original identity is that we belong to the superior energy, but we ourselves have degraded to this position where we are being under the influence of the inferior energy, Maya, due to our material desires, due to our own foolishness. So as mentioned earlier, Krishna has given the shortcut to cross over the ocean of material existence simply by surrendering to him, as he himself mentions in 7.14. However, Krishna also acknowledges the strong effect of Maya. So that's why we have to surrender, completely surrender, and always keep increasing our devotional service. Also, Krishna talks about the spiritual world in 8.20. From 8.15, where Krishna talks about Dukkhalayam Ashashvatam, he describes about all the attributes of this material world. Then in 8.20, Krishna talks about the spiritual world, which always remains eternally, unlike the material universes, which are vulnerable to repeated creation and annihilation. The spiritual world always exists as it is, eternally. All the material planets, upper, lower, and intermediate, are scattered throughout the universe. They only exist during the lifetime of Brahma. So the entire material universe is always subject to repeated creation and annihilation. But the spiritual world always exists eternally. So we can achieve eternal life only in the spiritual world, not in the material world, unlike as what is being claimed by the material scientists. So there's no point in wasting our time by engaging in discussions with them. We just have to utilize our time to study the Shastras and get the transcendental message. Now, I guess we are all experts in this calculation of Brahma's day. Even after living for 311 trillion years, Brahma has to die. This is what Brahma clearly wanted to convey to the idiots like Hiranyakashipu and Ravana. But those idiots didn't understand. And in Kali Yuga, there are many fan clubs for Ravana made by idiots who are more foolish than Ravana. After the devastation, meaning the entire material nature is only manifested, Prakriti is actually refers to the manifest state of material nature. There is also the unmanifest state, which is called Pradhana. The material nature Prakriti exists only during the daytime of Brahma. During the night of Brahma, everything is merged into the waters of devastation. The water rises from the bottom of the material universe. It covers up to the upper planetary systems, but still Satyaloka exists during the night of Brahma, and the cycle continues throughout the life of Brahma. But even after 100 years of Brahma's lifetime, even he has to die when complete annihilation takes place. So as long as we remain in this material universe, we can never get solutions to our problems. The cosmic manifestation within the jurisdiction of the various Brahmas is but a display of 1/4 of the energy of the Lord, Ekapada Vibhuti. Beyond the jurisdiction of Brahma is the spiritual nature, which is called Tripad Vibhuti, 3/4 of the Lord's energy. So it is also explained by Brahma in chapter 6 of the second canto, Bhagavatam. In verses 19 and 20, Brahma is explaining about the nature of the material universe and the spiritual world. These chapters cover the conversation between Brahma and Narada Muni. In verse 19, Brahma is talking about Ekapada Vibhuti. The material universes are formed through the 1/4 of the Lord's energy. And in verse 20, Brahma explains that the spiritual world consists of 3/4 of the Lord's energy. We can also see from this cover design of the first canto of Bhagavatam, apart from Goloka Vrindavana, we can see there are so many Vaikuntha planets. All are illuminated by the Brahmajyoti effulgence originating from Goloka Vrindavana, from the body of Krishna. But this dark spot, the Mahatattva, under the jurisdiction of Mahavishnu, we can also see many other material universes. So as long as we are stuck in this dark spot, even by going to Swargaloka or even to Satyaloka, we can never liberate ourselves from the problems of Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadhi. We have to elevate ourselves. We have to escape from this dark spot and elevate ourselves to the spiritual world. The predominating supreme person residing within the spiritual nature, the spiritual world, is Lord Sri Krishna, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 8.22. He can be approached only by unalloyed devotional service and not by processes of jnana, yoga, or karma. Not just in 8.22, Krishna has emphasized this in many other verses also, like 6.47, 18.55. The karmis of Ruti focus can elevate themselves to Swargaloka. But we also know from verses 9.20 and 21 from the Gita that even after going to Swargaloka, whatever piety that we accumulate, they tend to expire, and then we still have to return to this middle planet. So that is the importance of Bhakti Yoga. Only Bhakti Yoga qualifies us to enter the spiritual world. No one can enter into the spiritual Vaikuntha planets without being trained in devotional service. On the material planets, everyone from Brahma down to the end is trying to lord it over material nature, and this is the material disease. The refusal to surrender to Krishna is itself the material disease. As long as this material disease continues, the living entity has to undergo the process of bodily change. Ultimately, has to endure an unmanifested condition during the two devastations. So meaning it happens during the night of Brahma. During the night of Brahma, when the water rises in the material universe, the Garbhodaka ocean, annihilation takes place. So all the planets below Satyaloka, they get annihilated. So that keeps repeating during every night of Brahma. And then there is one complete annihilation, during which even Brahma gets annihilated. Even Satyaloka is annihilated before the creation of another material universe. So as long as we are stuck in this Mahatattva, the dark spot, we can never escape from the problems of Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadhi. So the only solution is to regain our association with the Supreme Lord in the spiritual world. The conditioned soul who tries to dominate material nature is instead subjected to the laws of material nature and the sufferings of repeated birth and death. We saw earlier that our true identity is that we belong to the superior energy, the para prakriti of the Supreme Lord. Our original identity is that we belong to the superior energy. But due to our material conditioning, we are being influenced. We are subject to the influence of material energy, which is actually inferior. The material energy is inferior to us only if we understand our identity. Now, in our present materially engaged condition, we have been degraded to the extent that we are being influenced by Maya, which is actually inferior to us. Powerful nature can be pacified only by the awakening of God consciousness. So Krishna has explained it in a very simple manner in 7.14. Also in 18.66, one must perfectly know both Sambhuti and Vinasha. Sambhuti, the independent Supreme Lord, he is eternal. The spiritual world is eternal. The temporary material manifestation keeps going through the cycles of creation and annihilation. As long as we are trapped in the material universe, we still have to undergo repeated birth and death. So it is important for us to understand both these, that which is eternal and also that which is temporary. So only this knowledge can save us from all the material miseries. Nor can one be saved from these devastations by the opening of hospitals. One can be saved only by complete knowledge of the eternal life of bliss and awareness, we often hear from many self-proclaimed intellectuals who say that why waste money on temples, build more schools and hospitals. So we often hear them say this, but the beauty of these self-proclaimed intellectuals is that they often we can see them cautiously targeting only temples. They won't talk about other places of worship. According to them, if we shut down all temples and build more schools and hospitals, all the world's problems can be solved. They will never talk about the wastage of land for cemeteries. So they are always cautious about targeting only temples. They will never talk about how much land is wasted for cemeteries. Also, in 2012, the Akhilesh Yadav government in Uttar Pradesh, they allocated 200 crore rupees for construction of boundary walls around the graveyards. So these are the people who tell us not to waste money for temples, but they waste all the resources for graveyards. And another interesting information about this genius Akhilesh Yadav is that after losing the state assembly election in 2017, he was so hopeful about winning again in 2022. And then he tried to fool all the voters by saying that Lord Krishna told him in his dreams that he will bring Ram Rajya. Just because he has a certain surname, he was thinking that he could fool the voters like this. But the results were announced last year in March, and it was very clear that who was preferred by Krishna. So we cannot really blame him, because there's one family which has been fooling all the people of Bharat for over 6 decades with their fake surname. Now, regarding the construction of hospitals, those intellectuals always say that we should not waste money for temples. Again, they will always be very cautious only to target temples. And then they say that we should build more schools and hospitals. In the earthquakes in Turkey, which happened earlier this year, at least 15 hospitals were damaged during the earthquake. So as mentioned earlier, as long as we remain in this material universe, we are subjected to repeated cycles of birth, death, old age, and disease. But even when we are occupying a certain particular body, all the living entities are also subject to the threefold miseries: Adhyatmik, Adidevik, Adibhautik. So the Adibhautik clash, like earthquakes and other natural disasters, are examples of Adibhautik clash. So we can see that when natural disasters happen, even the hospitals get destroyed. So to this, the so-called intellectuals, they have no answers. They say that we simply have to shut down all temples, build more schools and hospitals, and all the problems will be solved. They don't have answers to about how we should deal with these threefold miseries. All the answers have been provided in our authentic and authorized scriptures. We just have to follow them instead of wasting time with all these self-proclaimed intellectuals. We must therefore save ourselves and our fellow man in the right way. There is no question of liking or disliking the truth. If we want to be saved from repeated birth and death, we must take to devotional service to Lord. There can be no compromise. If we are serious about liberating ourselves from all these problems of Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadhi, and also to liberate ourselves from the threefold miseries, there can be no compromise. We have to engage in devotional service and follow the instructions of our acharyas and the scriptural injunctions, so that we can go to Goloka, back to Godhead. So thanks for attending today's session. So any questions or comments?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you. We'll meet again next week. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Sorry for the late.